Hey everyone, welcome back to the PB&J podcast, where we're talking with pioneers and builders here in the city of Jacksonville. And today I have with me Nick Birdsong, somebody I've known for a couple of months now. Very excited to have him on. Nick, welcome to the show.
How you doing, man?
Doing good, doing good. How are you doing?
Doing good, man. Making it
Good.
through the week.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Hey, I'm obviously super grateful you could come on today. Um, you and I've had a chance to sit down and have lunch and break bread and get to know each other a little bit. But for those who might be listening or watching and seeing your name for the first time, can you kind of give them a little bit of an intro as to who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Nick Birdsong. I'm the director of digital and social media for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Going into my fourth season, so I'm just super excited about that. Prior to joining the Jaguars, I was a manager of social and digital for the Denver Nuggets. So I've had experience in the NBA and the NFL, and I had a whole career before that as a high school and college sports reporter.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Obviously, I'm excited to dive into all that stuff while we talk here today. Um, One thing that I wanted to start off with, obviously we're here in Jacksonville. Aren't you originally from Florida?
Yes, I am. I'm from Tampa, Florida.
Okay,
I was born in St. Petersburg and then moved to Tampa shortly thereafter. Kind of spent my entire adolescence, right down the road, so to speak, 3 or 4 hours down the road in Tampa and St. Pete.
very cool. And then I believe you went to school in Florida as well, correct? Did you go to school in Tallahassee?
I did. I went to Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, many moons ago.
Okay, and you went for journalism. Is that correct?
Absolutely. My degree. This was obviously, like I said, many moons ago, so way back in the day. My degree was actually in newspaper journalism when that thing called newspapers actually existed.
Yeah,
Obviously, my career has transitioned kind of over the years, but yeah, went to FAMU way.
awesome. Yeah, print journalism is definitely it's adopted for sure. It's more there's more digital focus. Obviously, your role today has a huge part in that. I had a question when you graduated. Obviously, you went to journalism, but from my understanding, your internships and your first couple of roles out of college when you were doing the writing was in sports. When you went to school at FAMU and you graduated, did you know that sports was going to be your path, or is that something that kind of just fell into your lap?
So I actually had internships inside and outside of sports. So like I said, I was a newspaper student, so we had sequences, and there was public relations, there was newspaper, there was broadcast, and there was graphic design, right? So School of Journalism and Graphic Design. So my sequence was newspaper. I did work as a sports editor and sports reporter for the FAMU, which is the student newspaper at FAMU, and so I wanted to go in sports, but sports, just kind of like it is now, a very saturated field, a lot of competition, and so a lot of the internships, especially the paid ones, and I couldn't afford to do any free internships. I don't believe in working for free anyway, but I couldn't afford to do any free internships, and so I did internships in news, and then I actually didn't do a sports internship until I did a post grad internship that was in sports actually.
Okay. Whenever you did the post grad internship, is that when you were like, okay, whatever it takes, this is where I want to be? Like, I want to be in sports, or was that more so an option? And you were like, hey, let me see what this is, and then if need be, I'll go into something more news focused or something like that.
Yeah, it was definitely the latter. I had two post grad internships, so one was in sports and one wasn't. So the first one wasn't in sports. I was doing cops and crimes in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I don't know if you know anything about Milwaukee, but it's
I do. I've been there.
okay. Yeah, so
Yeah.
obviously, like, very high crime city, a lot of stuff going on. I could tell you some stories about that. And then my second post grad internship was in sports. And I mean, I was happy to get that. I've always loved sports. I've always played sports. And it just so happened that through a connection that I had at that newspaper, I ended up getting my first job in sports, and things kind of snowballed from there.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, when it comes to Milwaukee, I'm a big sports guy too. I guess I like all the sports, but I have a life goal. I want to go to all 30 ballparks.
Oh, you one of
Um,
those guys?
I'm one of those guys. I don't do
I
like the
guess.
football stadiums. I don't do the basketball arenas because the dimensions are the same. Every football field's 100 yards by 40
Yeah, I never
yards.
thought about that. Yeah,
Every NBA court's the same size, but every MLB ballpark,
it's
not only are
different.
the dimensions different, but they're allowed to like put whatever they want in the outfield. Like some parks have waterfalls, some of them have weird sculptures, but
Right, right.
I think it's always cool to see what every city has to offer.
Yeah. I think that's kind of wild though, like in general, like in baseball. I feel like it should be uniform. It should be regulation, like the size of the field, like
I agree.
how the Red Sox can just have the big green monster. Like, why is that legal? You know what I mean? Like, why? That's crazy.
I don't know. I really don't. I think they'll probably give you an answer like, "Oh, it's part of our tradition," or whatever the case may be. But I agree with you. I think that if you're going to make stats a huge deal about awards and Hall of Fame careers, and you're going to vote on that type of stuff, that the playing field should be equal across the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, my birthday's always right around opening day. So every year I try to go to a different city to go to opening day. And one year I spent a few days in Milwaukee, and I loved it, but I was there strictly to go to the Brewers game, so I didn't get to see a whole lot of extracurricular stuff. But I went down on Water Street over where the Bucks play and spent some time there as well. And when the weather's right, Milwaukee's has some
Yeah,
things to look at.
in the summer, if you go on the lake, all of that stuff, Milwaukee's a beautiful place. It has a lot of things going for it. So it was like any other city, you know what I mean? But it was definitely an eye-opening experience, reporting on cops and stuff during that time.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that was one of the few like non-sports roles for you.
Hmm.
I got a question. So you started out in journalism. You covered. I think you wrote for a paper or two in Alabama. I think you wrote for a paper or a website in Charlotte. Correct me if
Yep,
I'm
yep.
wrong.
You're correct. You're correct.
All right. And then you ended up working for the Nuggets and for the Jags. So I guess one of my first questions here, out of curiosity, is what's the difference in covering a sport or covering a team for a website or a newspaper versus working internally and pushing out?
Yeah. Well, I think obviously the first difference is when you're your audience, right? So when you're or your approach to the audience. The audience is actually might be somewhat the same, but obviously, like as a journalist, you're there to be an objective third party who is reporting the facts and the interesting news that emerges from the team, good or bad. When you're working for the team, typically when you're working in social digital for a team, that falls under one of two categories. It falls under public relations or it falls under marketing. And so you're trying to make the team as appealing as possible to convince fans to invest and ultimately transact, which is buy tickets and support the team and stuff like that. So obviously, like working for the team, you're not putting out any information about if a player gets in trouble. You know what I mean? Or if there's
Okay, yeah.
turmoil. And so if you're covering the team as a beat reporter, those are the type of objective news related stories that you're going to be sharing with your audience or whatever. And so it's still storytelling. It's just used in a different way. I always say like my skill is I'm a storyteller, whether I'm doing that for a website or as a writer, or whether I'm doing that in the way that I'm doing now as a marketer through social and digital. The platform is different, but the skill set or the mindset that I take to it is the same.
All right, man. That's really cool. Thank you for walking me through that. So going from sporting news, and you went from sporting news to the Nuggets, correct? Did I
Yep.
mess that up? Okay. So you went from writing, and then you were the man. Did you work your way into the manager of digital at with
Yeah.
the
So
Nuggets?
I was a manager of social and digital for the Nuggets.
Okay. Help us understand, like, what is that role, and I guess similarly your role now in total. What does that entail? Obviously, you guys, um, director of digital and with social media, so you guys are in control of the posts that get seen and the things that end up on the website. But maybe a little peek behind the curtains for everybody in terms of how you guys consume or curate or create the content, and is there a strategy around what you guys do? But I think some people would be very interested to hear kind of what your job is like, day to day.
Yeah. I mean, the difference between a manager and a director is just higher up on the totem pole, so to speak, on the chain. Obviously, you're an ex-military guy, so higher up on the chain of command. The manager of social and digital is more of a day-to-day function where you're responsible for the post by post output. So it's a tactical position, and then the director position is more strategic. Where you're managing the team of people who press the button, so to speak. And I mean, I think the approach to it is you're covering the team, but like I said, you're doing it in a way that is trying to make the team as appealing as possible to fans and the partners. And a lot of that, typically, if you really want to get into it, a lot of that, the content that you have that you're working with is somewhat the same. If you're on social media, you're posting highlights, you're posting, if you have a team reporter, you're posting articles, you're essentially using whatever that social media platform is to keep people engaged and to lead the conversation around the team with the ultimate goal of compelling people to buy tickets or transact in some sort of a way. But your job is not necessarily primarily to generate revenue, but it's to generate interest and to keep that interest up. So typically you have two ways that you do that, or it's probably more than two, but let me just give these two as examples. You have games, and then you typically have campaigns. So a game, you're covering it, just posting highlights, keeping people informed of what's going on in the game, injury updates, all of those things on the various social media platforms. And then the coverage of the game after, the post game press conference, locker room interviews, etc. You're making sure that your channels are being fed with all of that content. And then in the NFL and in the NBA, but in NBA it's more games. I can get into that later if you want. But typically, typically you have what's called tentpole events, right? So right now it's the off season in the NFL. So the NFL Combine just ended. Now we're heading into the draft. After the draft, you'll have rookie mini camp, then mini camp, and then you go into training camp, preseason, so on and so forth. Through all of that, of course, you have schedule release is a big tentpole event, which is usually in mid-May. We're working on that right now, and then you have Pro Bowl voting during the season, stuff like that. These tentpole events. That's how the NFL keeps the season is 4 months, but the calendar is 12 months. It's 24/7. NBA, you have a lot more games, so you have 82 games, and you have 82 days where you're following up on a game. But you also have All Star, and then you have your own teams campaigns, whether that's you know whatever you're doing internally to market the team. You have, season tickets go on sale at a certain date. You have season ticket renewals going on a certain date. And those are all things that you have to prep and prepare your fan base. And there's always a content element to it. And then there's sponsor content, and that's content that partners have paid to be integrated on.
Mm.
So whether that's uh, we do a lot of, we have a deal with Bud Light. We call it Teal World, and that's just kind of quirky content, guys in the locker room having fun, things of that nature. And we have the most partners in the entire NFL, maybe in all the team sports. So you see tons of sponsor content. A final score graphic could be sponsored, so on and so forth. And it's our job. It's the sales team's job to obviously garner the sales, and it's our job to deliver on what those companies have bought and what they're supposed to be integrated on. So there's a lot of stuff. That's probably like the best summary of it I can give off the top of my head in a few minutes.
Yeah, no, you killed it, because it made me think of some additional questions just based on some of the stuff you said. One of the things that stood out that makes a ton of sense is I know that the NBA season is like 8 months long. It's like twice as long. So does having it be longer? I know it's 82 games, and I think it goes from October to May, and then the playoffs finals are in June. Does it make the content schedule easier, knowing that you're 2 or 3 times a week? It's going to be about the games, and then the draft I think is pretty quick after the finals, so you can kind of turn around with the content, and then the summer league is right after that.
Yeah.
So is it easier to keep up with the quote unquote campaigns while you were doing the basketball side, or is it easier to do it now that you're doing something with the NFL with the 12-month calendar, just it being different cycles of things?
I mean, it's like six and one, half dozen in the other. It just depends on, you know, the way that you look at it, right? So, of course, like I said, in the NBA, there's a lot of basketball that you're covering. There's 82 games that you have to follow up on, but they still have, marketing campaigns that you have to do while you're covering the game. So a lot of times, like I would be at the office all day following up on games, preparing for the next game, and then you still have, city edition jerseys that are coming out. You still have ticket sales initiatives. You're still doing all of that stuff while you're covering the games. The NFL is a little bit different because you have more time to plan for a game, but there's also associated with that a higher expectation. So you're thinking like, hey, we know on these 8 or 9 home games in the regular season is where we're going to have to drive for each of those weeks, for each of those months, the most engagement, revenue, all of that, and everything that we do is geared up toward that one game. But we have time in the off season to plan for these huge tentpole events. But there's a lot of expectation around those as well. Like the NFL draft is 3 days, the NBA draft is one. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So and you have to hold attention longer for those tentpole events. So it's not like one is necessarily easier than the other. It's just a lot different. So in the NBA, my project management skills have, I mean, the NFL, my project management skills have to be a lot more honed, whereas your game coverage skills in both have to be good. But you have a lot less time even to capitalize on some things in the NBA because you got another game. You might have a back to back. You know what I mean? You might have 3 games in 5 days. And so, sure, Nikola Jokic had a triple double on Tuesday, but you got to gear up for this big game against the Jazz or the Timberwolves the next day. And you need to celebrate that, but it's going to be very short lived. And then you have to move on to the next thing. So it's really just about time management, excuse me, and making, editorial decisions and stuff like that based on your fan base and insights and numbers. And we can talk about that stuff too if you want.
Yeah, absolutely, I do. What was the difference between the two teams, like internal teams? Like, how big was your content, digital and social team with the Nuggets versus the Jags?
Well, so interestingly enough, initially my team at the Nuggets was very big, but we had a lot of turnover there. So at the end, it was very small. There was like 3 people. At the Jags, we've
Inch.
grown ever since so it started out with the Nuggets at maybe like 7, 8, somewhere in there, maybe even a little bit more. And then we had a lot of turnover for various reasons and ended up being like me and 2 other guys as far as the day to day grind of the operation. Of course, there were some people up the chain, but as far as just day to day making those decisions, posting the content, etc., it was like 3 people at the end of my time there. Then here at the Nuggets, at the Jaguars, I was in a very interesting situation where I came in as a director. There were 2 pre-existing employees. They ended up leaving, taking better jobs. They had been here for a number of times, so I had to hire my entire staff from scratch. So at one point it was like me and an intern while I'm doing all of these interviews, trying to fill all these open positions that we have. And so since then we've been able to add a few more positions. So our team is about like 7 or 8 right now, which is a pretty strong team.
Yeah, no, that's great. Obviously, this podcast is focused on leadership a lot. So you went through a huge hiring campaign, while having to manage your workload, while having to get everything, like basically the entire team's load taken care of week in and week out until you're able to build out. Then you had to train those people to get them up to speed. So I know you were talking about your project management skills, but from a hiring perspective, you know, how were you able to balance that? What were you looking for in terms of traits for people that you did hire? And now that you've gotten some people ramped up and you're responsible for their careers and professional well-being, what part of that do you take more seriously as you nurture these people and try and get them to build a career of their own?
Yeah, well, to answer your first question, initially there wasn't a ton of balance at all. I was, came in right. So those 2 pre-existing employees left almost immediately after the 2021 draft, right? And so at that point, there's a window of time before the season starts, and I need to basically fill an entire staff and run our day-to-day operations until that happened. Schedule release was coming right then, and my team at the time was literally just me and an intern,
Yeah.
who had been there longer than me. And so there really wasn't a ton of balance during that time. We would grind all day. And then for the tentpole events, because we didn't necessarily have time to work on those during the day because we are just doing the day to day so much, he and I would meet during the weekends and like literally have like whiteboard meetings and stuff like that. And then carry that, like meet on Saturday for like 3 or 4 hours, like off the clock, and then carry that into the week so that we could have while I was still filling out this team. And so as far as how I went about doing that, obviously what I'm looking for as far as traits is different based on the position. So 2 of the more important positions I had to fill, I had 2 leadership positions that I had to fill, which was the social media manager position and the digital media manager position. And so because I was new to the NFL and I had been a social media manager, I knew that basically if you hadn't been a coordinator or an entry level person for an NFL team for the social media manager, I really wasn't going to be able to consider you because I didn't have time to learn the NFL while another person learns the NFL. I needed somebody who had pre existing experience working with the NFL. because there's one of the fundamental differences between working in the NBA and working in the NFL is, and I'll just put it like this is the way I explain it to people. In the NBA, from a content perspective, you have more freedom but less structure and guidelines. So you have more freedom to do whatever you want, but there's in my opinion, there's less support to show you exactly how to do those things. In the NBA, you have a ton, I mean, in the NFL, you have a ton of rules. You can do this, you can't do this, especially around highlights and things of that nature. But they do a good job of, there's a best practices deck for everything. And the NBA might have that. Maybe I just didn't know about it or didn't utilize it. I'm not saying that. And from my experience, that's how I deem it. And there are stricter rules around highlights in the NFL and stuff like that, which is going to be a larger part of your content. So I needed somebody who had pre-existing NFL experience in that role, so I knew what I was looking for there. The other leadership position, I just got a gem of an employee who happened to be a colleague of a person for the creative agency that we were working with at the time. And in the entry level positions that we filled, I could go through each one of them, but basically, I was just looking for number one, talent, desire, um, obviously somebody who can do the rudimentary functions of the job, who can do the basic things that we're asking the job to do. But what I always look for from a trait perspective is I look for people who are intrinsically motivated
Yeah.
because it's as fun as these jobs are, it's a grind, right? And so if I have to inject motivation into you, we're never going to get where we're going. But if you are a person that takes pride in what you do because your name is on it and you have goals that are beyond the role that you are, you're going to bring that every day. And that's when we can really cook with grease. So that's really what I look for. And then, like, if it's a creative role, somebody who is somebody who's creative and really loves their craft because it's a part of who they are. I've never seen a creative who, like, if you're a brick mason, you can lay bricks well and then go home. But for a creative, for the most part, that's something that's a part of who that person is. And
Yeah.
so those are some of the things that I look for. And then, of course, like, just savvy around, like, somebody who likes sports, likes the NFL, savvy who has skills, you know, who's a culture fit, but also who has the professional skills that we're looking for. So that's a long answer, but it was kind of a long question, so that's okay.
No, that was a great answer. It's amazing how important being intrinsically motivated is for so many different professions and careers. It's interesting to hear it, you know, no matter who I talk to, it seems to be a priority amongst people who are in hiring positions. But now that you feel that you've built this team, you know, the latter half of that question was about, you know, now that you're responsible for their careers.
Oh
You're
yeah, yeah.
you're the director. So how you know, obviously how seriously do you take that responsibility, and is there anything that you practice every day or think about every day in terms of making sure that you're doing right by them?
Yeah, that is something that I take, extremely serious. It's very, very important. Um, though oftentimes people say that they don't quit jobs, they quit supervisors. And actually, me having to hire my entire staff from scratch is a rare position. Usually, you come in and you have to manage pre-existing employees, pre-existing personalities, pre-existing politics. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that actually gives me so much sway, so much credibility with them is that I hired my whole staff. So at least at that root core level, they can't say like Nick doesn't like me or Nick has it out for me because if I did, I wouldn't have hired you in the first place. Like I individually handpicked you for this position for my entire team, and there's not a lot of managers, that can say that. And I can give like other examples is I always try to say like you have to win the person. You know what I mean? Part of leadership is
Interesting.
people say that it's getting people to do what you want them to do, but make them think it's their idea. There's some truth to that, but
Yeah.
but like just taking an interest in them as a person helps a lot. So, for example, our social media manager, he was coming from Philadelphia, but I needed to hire him quickly. So I literally went to the apartment that he lives in, visited with the landlord, and FaceTimed him so that he could see the place before he even got there, so he could make his decision. And so, like, that's one of the things that he always appreciates. That he was like, man, you didn't have to do that, but you did. Another another one of our employees, he had another one of our positions. He hadn't worked directly in football before, so it was somewhat of a risk, for me who hadn't. He just worked at a college that didn't have a football team. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But I knew that his work was stellar, and so he had just signed a lease when he when I was trying to recruit him here, and I was like, man, that lease is just worth the piece of paper that it's written on. You can get out of that lease, man. And, and I was like, you just tell him that you got a job somewhere else. Something happened. I was like, he'll sell that apartment to somebody else. And so like he did it. He came here and he's been a great fit. Another person on our team, we tried to get him my first season and we didn't. He stayed at another job. And I kind of told him like, man, I think it'd be a great deal if you just came here now. But he was like, no, I want to stay here. Things, end up falling apart there. We went back and were able to get him. And so I think just it's important immediately to kind of build some sort of a personal rapport that's beyond like every time I call him, it's not always about work. Like one of I'm a sports junkie. Like our social media specialist got him in mind a lot. He's a sports junkie like me. Sometimes I just call him, just something happened. We're just gonna talk about sports. I'm not gonna mention an assignment or next week or anything like that. So I think I'm in a unique position because I hired all of them. That gives me a little bit of cachet. Like there's not that typical like my boss doesn't like me or type of situation because like my boss picked me out of the sea of applicants and chose me. So that gives me a little bit more credibility. And I was able to hire really like make 3 hires that all turned out pretty well when I was with the Nuggets as well. But I think just establishing that personal rapport early on is really really important so that when there are those tense situations or those times where I kind of just need you to do this, and sometimes I mean how it is, like, sometimes I just need you to do this because I'm telling you need to do it and I don't have time to really explain why a lot.
Yeah.
But I also think one of the things I try to do as a leader is you have to peel back the kind of the enmity that's between like superior and inferior a lot of times, and like let them in and let them know a little bit about your world as well. And also what I'm big on is like creating like professional development opportunities, for them. Like if we have PD budget, I don't use any of it on myself. If there's a PD opportunity that's from the league or from the team and I can be available to it, I will. But the dollars that are specifically for professional development, I don't want to use that for myself. I only want to use that for my team, for my people, and that works out well a lot. Or, they seem to appreciate that.
Yeah, man. That was a really good answer, and thank you for so much to unpack. It's really good information too for people who are like just getting into leadership. Because back in 2020, I was promoted twice at the recruiting agency I was at, and I tried to really hone in on two things. One, I knew how I liked to be managed, and then whenever I started managing others, I started to realize that so many people like to be managed a specific way. So now
Hmm.
it's so the big thing for me was trying to meet them where they were, but also help them understand where I'm coming from. Um, and like you said, not every time you're going to have the opportunity to explain why you're telling them to do something, but I think as long as with you hiring them, this helped. But with you being able to um, have a conversation with them or a chain of conversations with them to help them understand what your style is like, why you do the things you do, etc., then future conversations and future situations will be substantially easier for them to understand. Like, okay, Randall's telling me this because of this, and he doesn't have to tell me why. I already know that.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
huge. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I think.
awesome.
Yeah, I think another thing I kind of alluded to it was like when you're making decisions that are maybe like among people that are at your level or maybe even your higher ups, even just having off conversations and explaining to them a little bit of what you go through as a leader or how you're operating at a level that doesn't necessarily involve them, like makes them understand that you care. And it's also a form almost like informal training, right? So
Yeah,
I was in a situation like that this week where me and a VP are trying to make a decision, and this really doesn't involve like up until the execution level, like the people that report to me. But I tell them about those conversations and stuff like that because I know that they want insight into the position that I am if they're going to try to be at it here or somewhere else. And also like it lets them know like I'm not trying to like hide anything from them or hold onto my position so tightly that it's at the expense of their development or sometimes they just want to know like, hey, what went into this decision, and if it's something that I can tell them, I do it.
Yeah, no, man, perfect point. Yeah, because everybody's forward thinking, right? Like, okay, one day I'm going to have Randall's spot, or one day I'm going to have Nick's spot. If the more they know before they get into that spot, the better they're going to be able to serve the people that are working for them when they end up getting it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, giving them some insight is super critical. You talked about building rapport with your people. You know, you being a sports junkie and one of your employees being a sports junkie. It really made me think about this relationship I had with somebody I hired at the place I was promoted to director. He was my second hire. He was a big sports junkie, but he's a big Orlando Magic fan. Um, I'm a big San Antonio Spurs fan, like beyond diehard. And so the last 2 years, we've had the number one pick, the Magic and the Spurs. And so we talk a lot of trash. And we did while we were working together. You know, he works for the company I came from, but I would say we're friends to this day. Like that relationship is forever now. That's something I never really thought about while I was the director or the manager. But you know, he was the most respectful person. He always worked hard. He always made sure that he did it the right way. I always made sure I tried to give back. You were talking about the PD budget. Every chance we could to like give the people that worked for us an opportunity to grow or learn. Or, you know, as we were coming out of the back half of the pandemic, man, and people were kind of like in their houses feeling alone, like how can we get them out of the house? Like I remember we rented out a movie theater one time so everybody could have their own row and like feel
Oh
safe.
yeah,
It's just
that's
stuff
love.
like that, man. I can think back on, and all the stuff you're saying has really resonated with me in terms of what we did during that time. So I'm sure they're grateful, the people that work for you, and if they're watching, make sure you tell Nick you're grateful. Uh, um, what is your favorite sport? You know, you're a junkie, but what do you tend to lean towards?
Yeah, basketball is actually my favorite sport. Basketball is my first love. Football is right there too, though. Right after it. Uh, Lifelong Florida State football fan. I'm from Tampa. Obviously, I work for the Jags now. But you know, like you live here, so man, just down south, especially Florida, like I love football. But basketball is actually my favorite sport. But the funny thing is that I actually don't have a basketball team in particular that I root for. I love any basketball. I will sit up and watch like any NBA game that's on. I, I watch like women's college basketball. Like I just love basketball. If there's like when I was in North Carolina, they call it the hoop state. So there's just tons of just D1 basketball recruits all over, like right down the street from my apartment. That like there was a point guard who he ended up he went to Creighton first, but then he ended up at Kentucky, and just this basketball powerhouse like public school where they just produce great players. Like I would literally just go to high school basketball games just to see, oh, this guy's going to BC, this guy's going to. I remember I saw Jalen LeCue. I don't know if you know who that is, but Jalen LeCue when he was in high school there. So I actually don't root for a particular team in basketball, but in football I have team allegiances and stuff like that. And I'm also a big soccer fan, a big soccer fan. So
Oh,
I
really?
love European soccer and all of that.
Who's your favorite team? Soccer team?
Um, I'm not at liberty to say because of my employer.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he owns a soccer team.
So
it's
go Fulham.
it's definitely Fulham.
Go Fulham.
Nick told me at lunch a couple months ago his favorite soccer team was Fulham. We got to put that on the record.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you gone to any of the UNF basketball games, like whenever they're in the conference tournament?
Not when they're in the conference tournament. I did go to the River City Rumble once.
Okay.
I think that was in 20. Don't get me wrong, 2021, one of those years. We like the like basically a lot of the guys from the team came out. It was the one that was at JU, so we got to see that whole rivalry. And coincidentally at the time, one of the guys that I covered when he was like literally in the sixth grade but playing high school basketball was at JU. So yeah,
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, man. I know you say you love basketball. You should absolutely try to get out to see UNF play whenever they're fighting for the conference championship and trying to get into the big tourney. That's a
Yeah,
ton of fun.
I love their arena. It just looks like it's an amazing facility.
Yeah, it's a little small, but it's nice. Like, I mean,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It looks like it's just dope, like a dope environment for a college basketball game.
um, you don't follow teams, but I guess you do. You follow players, or do you just watch? You just see what's on and click it. Like
Oh
you're
no,
like,
no, I follow players and stuff like that. But yeah, I just don't have like a favorite, basketball team like NBA.
look, man, the Spurs bandwagon is wide open. There's room on it.
That's what I wouldn't do.
Oh man,
That's what I wouldn't do though.
I'm gonna edit this out. I'm gonna edit this out.
You can, man. Yeah, that's what I wouldn't do.
I'm gonna edit it to where you say, Randall, I love the Spurs. I can't wait to root for the Spurs.
Nah, man. Room for the Spurs is like it's like room for the IRS and audit. You know what I mean? I'm not.
How in the world do you come up with that?
It's like it's almost like rooting for Duke or the Yankees or like
See, I feel that way about the Lakers. Like,
or like it's almost kind of like being a Celtics fan. I'm not doing that.
there was a gentleman who I had on the podcast a couple weeks ago who's from Jacksonville. He put a song out. I think it was in 2000 called WAP. His name's J Dash. He's now a software development director in Austin, Texas, which is my hometown. He just redid, I guess the Spurs just decided to redo their theme song and they hired J Dash to do it. I don't know if they've released it yet, but I thought that was really cool and I can't wait to check that out.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. And he's from Duval. He's from like Mandarin side. So the fact that people in Jacksonville are doing big things, man, I love that so much.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah. One of the questions I asked you when we went to lunch that's on my mind now, maybe people would want to hear it, is I asked if the vibe was different in when you go to work on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday during a week in which you guys won versus when you guys didn't win.
Oh,
Or maybe when, the playoffs are happening and you guys aren't in there. But can you kind of help people understand, like, is there a difference in energy levels? Do people treat it as a standard 9 to 5? They show up to work, they do their job, they go home, or is there like an emotional involvement in the team's success?
no, there's definitely an emotional involvement in the team success. I mean, obviously it is a job, and for a lot of roles, social is a little bit different because we have to work around the team schedule. And obviously, if you work on the football and the outside, then you're doing everything with the team. But no, there's definitely an emotional attachment. Especially in football, you have one game a week. Everything that the team, the organization, the company is putting into it is leading up to that Sunday, whether that's home or whether that's an away or whether that's away. And so when you lose, you have to wait another week. And if you have a bye, you have to wait 2 weeks
Yeah.
in order to avenge that, or in the build up starts all over. I think that's one of the funner parts or more fun parts of working in the NFL is that emotional attachment. Obviously, like, football is a very like emotional game. I always say that. I think even in basketball, I think you can play it with skill a lot. Like you can play it with your talent level, but football, you have to it's a soul thing. Like you have to play football from here, just the sheer physicality of it. I think that's why people connect with it. You People connect with it the most, and so that definitely filters into what I do. We're obviously like we're all professionals, but yeah, there's definitely a different energy when you walk in on Victory Monday. We have Victory Monday T-shirts. You know what I mean? There's different
Okay.
content that we do. We have Victory Monday content that we roll out on our social channels after a win, and so there's certain things, trigger campaigns after wins that we execute and stuff like that. So there's different work to do after a win versus after a loss. But you're definitely like emotionally attached to it. Now, I wouldn't say it's like, oh, you need to go to therapy or nothing like that after a loss, but it's definitely an emotional attachment to it. But I think that's part of what makes it fun, and I think that's part of why people put so much effort and energy into what they do, because there's not really a lot of jobs like that. If you I don't want to like not necessarily like diss anybody's professions, but other jobs like Monday is always Monday. You know what I mean? But for us, during the season, there's something different attached to it.
No, it's very true. You mentioned the therapy thing. I know many of Jags fans who need therapy when the Jags
Oh,
lose. Many of them. Steve Krajewski, when you end up watching this, Travis Webb, our hearts go out to you. Next year, the Jags are going to go undefeated, though, so you don't have to worry about it
all day long.
all day long. You were talking earlier. You said you would get into some of the numbers about the job, and I don't know if those were impressions. I don't know if that was view counts or if there was a certain amount of pieces of content that you have to put out every week. But I would love to dive into that a little bit if you don't mind. Are you guys bound by a certain number of pieces you have to put out? Are you guys looking for a certain amount of engagement every week? Um, what are the main drivers behind the job, and help us unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, without giving specific figures, one, because it really like wouldn't necessarily help the answer, but there's not like a number like we have to post this many times. Like that doesn't exist. Now we do have partners, and the way that some of those things are sold, some of them are sold impressions based selling is something. Sometimes it is just a straight number of posts, depending on is it across whatever platforms it is. So those things matter, and they do give you every week we get a report who had the most raw engagement numbers, who had the most average engagement numbers, so on and so forth. And so you get to see how you compare to your peers. And obviously, like there's some things that go, into that. Market size matters, literally just the size of the fan base matters and stuff like that. But there's all kinds of metrics that we use. What I try to say is we don't allow the data to make the decisions, but we want to make data informed decisions when we're doing things. We know that there are certain times of day, certain types of content, certain vertical video versus portrait size or 16 by 9. All of these things matter when you're delivering content. Obviously, impressions and things of that nature. All of that stuff matters. So those are some of the, just like I said, making data informed decisions is a big part of what we do. And for me personally, I kind of love that because if I'm a competitive person, I probably said this while we were at lunch, is that like if you and me are shooting baskets, we're not playing one on one, we're just shooting baskets, change or whatever. Like we're not competing necessarily, but in my mind, I'm keeping track of how many shots you made and how many shots I made, and I'm competing whether you are or not. And so
Yeah.
I love that. I love that aspect of it for for us. That is that we have these hard numbers that we can go to and we can make improvements in an area, see where we went wrong. It's almost like game planning and coming back week to week and seeing what improvements we need to make.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, obviously, getting that data is incredible. Excuse me. Yeah, I guess it's easier with the style of content of the 20 era that you can be able to do that. Because I guess in print, you'd have to go off of how many newspapers you sold or how many people clicked the link. Between what you do now and understanding, obviously, you are competitive, and it's great that that drives you. But just based on where you came from versus where you are now, do you enjoy this more, or does a part of you still miss the print side?
Uh, Man, I enjoy this more to be honest. One, because on the print side, if we even want to call it, I don't know if that exists anymore, but whatever you want to call it, as a reporter, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
you're on the outside, looking in. You know what I mean? And so, uh, what better position for somebody who's a sports junkie than to literally like work for the team and be able to tell the story of the team, to be able to have, the resources, that we have via staff, via just uh, the entire fan base. Like there are things right now, that I know about that if I was a reporter, I wouldn't know about. You know what I mean? And just being able to tell stories, to shape narratives, and I think the biggest thing that I enjoy about it, and not to say that you don't do this as a reporter, but like man, life is hard, right? And sports is at the core, it's entertainment, and so I like the ability to be able to add to people's enjoyment. Like people scroll through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook as a way, like when you're watching a game, you probably got your phone in your hand, you're experiencing on the Spurs channels. And that's a part of how you experience this thing that you're very passionate about, that's brought you so much joy throughout your life. And just being able to add to that, I think is something that you don't get to do in the same way, as a reporter. Um, yeah, I honestly like this more.
That's great, man. Um, for somebody who, whether they're listening to this or whether or not, they have decided like sports is going to be their avenue or that's what they want to do. We discussed that it's highly competitive. We discussed that it's saturated. The barrier of entry is tough. What kind of advice can you give to somebody, whether they're coming out of college, coming out of their internships, or maybe trying to make a career switch at 30? What kind of advice can you give them to maybe help them with their pursuit?
Yeah, I think the first thing is do your research so that you can know what you want to do, right? So a lot of times, like I'll get people who reach me through email, LinkedIn, whatever, and they say, I want to work in sports. Sports is a broad, vast industry, right? With various entry points, right? And so what I liken it to is like if somebody says, I want to be a doctor. Okay, do you want to be a podiatrist or do you want to be a brain surgeon? Like both of those are doctors of sorts or work in medicine, but they're vastly different fields. And you're going to have to go about becoming a podiatrist in a different way than you have to go about becoming a neurologist. So do research, depending on where you are in your career, get some experience, maybe doing some things or just researching some things to figure out what it is you want to do, because that is going to determine what skills you have to acquire and, who you need to ask questions to. Oftentimes, I'll get people who want to be in front of the camera. They want to be um, on air talent, right? I do not know how to tell you to do that. I don't know what path you need to go. I can tell you some general things, but essentially what I usually tell people is you need to get a mentor in that field who can kind of help you and take some interest in you and guide you. And then at a certain point, once you start getting some experience, you need to get an agent. But that's never been a desire of mine. I don't know how to tell you how to become Taylor Rooks. So I think initially that's that's the first thing is just do some research so that you can know what you want to do, so that you can know what skills you need to acquire and then what kind of help you need to seek out. That's probably like the first thing. And then depending on what your answer to that question is, then I can probably give you a little bit more direct you a little bit more specifically, give you some more informed insight. But those are, and I know that sounds mad basic, but those are two really, really important things
Yep.
at that point.
That's fair. You know, when people decide, when they make that decision, let's say that they say, I want to get into statistics. We're just picking a topic here. I mean, at that
Hmm.
point, like whenever they decide that they know what they want to do, or maybe they know the sport that they want to do it in, how important is networking and all of this? Like, and is something like LinkedIn even viable to do the networking, or do you need to show up to games and events and track meets and stuff like that to actually shake hands and introduce yourself?
Yeah, you'll notice like I think in twos. So I would say very interesting. I'm like naturally like an introvert, and so my networking skills aren't really the best. I don't know, like just the grace of God that I've been able to, have the career that I have and be at the point that I am because I'm not good at that, to be honest. Like how I got the job with the Jags, I applied and the CMO at the time, who a great guy named Julian Duncan, who's the CMO at the Houston Rockets now, called me back. I didn't know anybody here. I didn't reach out to anybody. I didn't know anybody that worked in the NFL at all. I just applied and got the job. Or basically applied and got a call back. It wasn't an immediate call back. It was some months later. I applied, I think in like, I don't know, November somewhere there. And they called me back like in January or something like that. I don't remember, but something like that. So I'm not good at that. But for I will say I do think LinkedIn is I don't know how slept on it is, but I see tons of opportunities on there. And I would say like 9 times out of 10, it's flattering to people when folks reach out to them. Now, I will say, like, you can't reach out to somebody with expectation. You can hope, but you can't expect. And so reaching out, I think that's a great way to do it. It takes you right to the person that you either want to talk to or think you want to talk to. And as long as you don't have expectations, as long as you're understanding that like you're gonna get more no's than yeses, but you don't need a million yeses. You need one yes
That's
or
right.
two. And I think what I always tell people is that you have to be your own mentor. Nobody's gonna look out for you like you. You know what I mean? Like you can if I needed help from Randall, like you're a nice guy, you're probably gonna want to help me out, but you're gonna help me out after you do everything that you got to do, stuff that is, and then whatever time you have left, that time to then you have that time to give to others. But the example that I use, and I didn't make this up, so don't give me credit for it, is that it's like if your car breaks down and you're on the side of the road, you can sit in your car and look out the window or out the out the dashboard, and at some point somebody will probably help you. But if you get out your car and you start pushing your car, you'd be surprised how quickly somebody else pulls over and comes alongside and starts pushing your car with you. So that's usually advice that I give.
That's incredible. It's spot on. But I've never heard of it like that, but that's absolutely correct. And obviously, I think knowing people, when you know people well enough, I'll give you an example. The guy I was telling you about that worked for the Magic. This dude's great. You point him in direction, this guy he'll do whatever, whenever, and he'll run forever. But like every single one of us, we don't know what we don't know. But if you know somebody well enough and you have an understanding like, hey, this person can be better, can be great, you can just help point them a little bit. That's why I was talking about the networking. I think like if I knew Nick super well and I knew Nick had goals, but Nick didn't really know what the next step was, but I did, I can kind of foreshadow it. I would be willing to help him with that. But it goes back to your exact point. Unless you're pushing your own car, there's not a chance in hell I'm going to help you
Right,
with it.
right.
So that's no, dude, that's great.
Yeah, and I don't want to like. I hate to sound like the 40-year-old guy kind of lamenting on the generation, underneath them. But it has been my experience that a lot that oftentimes like people reach out to you essentially expecting you to do what they haven't done for themselves, and that's that's not necessarily. I don't think that that's fair. One, people are finite. One of the things I always tell people when they reach out to me is like, look, like I don't know everything. I know a little bit. Whatever I know, I'm willing to share with you, but you have to take that information and you have to, let it swirl around in your head, measure it against what you know, measure it against what other people have told you. And I always end it with a disclaimer. Like, look, if you do something that I suggested you do and it don't work out, that's not my fault. This is a disclaimer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So don't say I did something Nick told me to do and it didn't work out. He ruined my career or something like that. But um, yeah, like just being thick-skinned when it comes to networking, understanding people are assistants. They're doing the best they can for themselves. They don't know everything. They're there to help, but ultimately you got to be in the driver's seat and navigate your own situation because Randall's path is not going to be I'm not going to be able to mirror it. My path, you're not going to be able to mirror it. Like I didn't do the whole entry level social media coordinator thing. I went from like kind of one space to another and then went into management. Like that's probably not going to happen. And I just happened to be right when all the social media platforms were proliferating. These kind of old guard type of publications were just getting on these platforms, and they needed people who were at the time younger and more tech savvy, assumingly more tech savvy, to manage them. Was I was in the right place at the right time, and that was my path. Now that's not gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? So I tell people that all the time, and I was like, I didn't go through that. I manage people who did, and I can give you some insight, but you're gonna have to navigate it from your own experience because I don't even have that experience.
Yeah. I mean, they say that luck is where capability meets opportunity. So like just with what you said probably reinforces to me that timing's a huge part of a lot of this too. It's just
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, man. Thank you. I got two questions. One's more still about the leadership side, and then we're going to end on a fun one.
Okay.
Is in terms of like material, is there a website or a book or a person on Twitter to follow that these people that are trying to figure out or study or trying to break into sports or whatever the case may be, maybe something you did or learned along the way that you could point people in direction to?
Strictly on leadership.
Yeah, leadership or I don't even know if there is kind of material on how to break into sports, but leadership would probably be a good one.
Yeah, I would say on leadership, the book isn't about like business leadership or, you know, it's not that germane, right? It's not that like pent on any one area. But there's a book called it's literally called The Book on Leadership. It's by a guy named John MacArthur. Um, and it's an incredible book on servant leadership. I would definitely recommend that one. And then what? Yeah, I think as far as a book is somebody to follow on Twitter.
Or a podcast or anything that you've listened to that.
Man, you know what's funny is there one of the things that was very helpful for me was a podcast, but it was I don't even remember what podcast it was. It was literally one of my friends who was who's in this industry as well. His name is Eric, and I cannot pronounce Eric's last name correctly. But Eric works for Perfect Game. He used to be the director of digital and social for the Houston Texans. He used to work for Amazon. So you put those two things together, you'll get it. It's something with an S. I don't know how to pronounce, but some of the things that he talked about in this podcast interview that he did, I literally listened to it like 3 times in a row before I took the job at the Nuggets and parroted a lot of the stuff that he said back to them in the interview. And it worked, and I took that stuff with me forever. But I would say, as far as books, a book on leadership by John MacArthur is definitely a great book on leadership. And I actually just finished like last week How to Win Friends and Influence People, which obviously is a noted classic. Most people probably have read it or have heard of it. But yeah, those two are pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, Dale Carnegie, absolutely. I couldn't remember the author's name, but everybody knows that book. So
It is great. Okay.
what was the
Last
second one?
This is the second one.
Okay, I got you.
And in your career, 16 years, 17 years, it's been a while. What has been your favorite moment in sports? Whether that was with the Nuggets, whether that was with the Jags, or whether that was covering a different sport or team. What's been the most memorable moment of your career so far?
All right, can I cheat and give you like more than one?
Yeah, you can.
Uh, One would definitely be the Jaguars comeback win. We came back from down 27 against the Chargers in the playoffs to beat them. That was an amazing experience just being there during that game.
Yep.
But the other thing that made it like particularly satisfying was, like there's teams always make little playful jabs at each other on social media, and so they did this video during the week. Oh man, I'll probably get killed for saying this, but whatever. They did this video during the week about like what all the national media was saying about them, and the Chargers can't do it, and blah 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 blah. And so they were favorites to win the game, even though we had the home game because we won the division. And they like basically like in the video they were saying we're keeping receipts of all these things that the media is saying about us, and it was like literally like piles and stacks of receipts in the video. And so so like we were like, okay, saw that. So me and my creative content manager, a guy named Devin Carvajal, literally before the game, we were walking around the office trying to find anybody that had a literal like receipt machine because we wanted to like,
Take a picture of it or something.
in case we
Yeah,
won a game, we had a little plan for that. But anyway, he ended up finding some way to do it online or whatever. And so after we won, we had a video of the receipt rolling up, and then it said it was always the Jags or whatever. And I mean, obviously, it performed incredibly well. But that
that's
was
great.
like an amazing experience. And then another one would be when I worked for the Nuggets. It was a bubble season, and so we were down 3-1 to the uh, Clippers, and end up coming back to win the series in 7 games. And that was an amazing experience. The Clippers were obviously like very favorited. Had a ton of really good players on that team. I remember one particular moment. I think it was when we cut it to 3-2. Like yeah, when we cut it to 3-2, we're down like a lot late, and end up coming back. And there was a moment. I want to say it was between one of the Morris twins. Can't remember which one. And like Paul Millsap, and basically like Paul was kind of on the latter end of his career, and his younger guys like getting into it with him, and Paul just like very like, and Paul just got like pissed off and like got in his face, and there was a picture of it, and like we used that after the game with like the caption like we want all the smoke and came back and won the series. So those are two amazing experiences, man. There's been a lot, man. I could go back forever, but I think like off the top of my head, maybe just because those are like the most recent.
Yeah.
Those are two of my ones. Definitely that playoff game was
Yeah.
fire, man. That was amazing.
I'll never forget that playoff game because it was cold as shit.
It was freezing that
It
night.
was I was like, we are in Florida. Dude,
Yeah,
that was like northeast cold.
yeah.
Um
It was freezing. And the crazy part was like for some reason I hadn't unloaded like my just like tickets or whatever. I had like a couple extra ones or whatever, or maybe like one extra one. And I just literally gave it to like a random guy, I think who worked for like University of Florida Athletics or something. And like I didn't know this guy at all. I don't even know how we got in contact. Like he DM me or something. I was like, oh man, sure you can have this because I just got it left over. I don't even know if he asked me for it. And like the guy like texted me. He was like, dude, this was the most amazing thing ever. Like and man, that was just a special moment. I don't think I'll ever forget that.
I don't think Jacksonville will either at all.
And honestly, the game before that, to get into the playoffs, beating Tennessee, when Rayshon Jenkins had the strip sack and Josh Allen like picks it up and picks up the fumble and runs into the end zone. So those back to back weeks, man, and both were like primetime games, night games. I can't wait to have that experience again. I think those were you two of the biggest is in my career working for a team. I would have to think back, before to think about something else, but I don't think anything was as exciting as those two things were.
I mean, those are two pretty good things. And look, I want that to happen too. But this hopefully we can come back with a better roster. Now we know like CJ Stroud and the Texans aren't going to make it easy.
Hmm.
The Colts, Anthony Richardson's going to be coming back from injury. He's not going to make it easy. So obviously we got our work cut out for us, man. But we're believers in the team. Obviously, we appreciate the content you put out. Is there any way, anybody that's listening, how can we support you? I mean, can we go obviously like all the social channels, engage with the content? Is there anything else that we can do?
Nah, man. As long as you're doing that, you're fine, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. Hopefully, it was what you expected, or
It was,
whatever. But
yeah,
nah, man. Like as long as you following the Jags channels, man, support the team. Make sure you like those posts. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and spam. But yeah, nah, man. As long as you're supporting the team, we're grateful.
awesome. Yeah, and I'll regurgitate that in the show notes, man. Push everybody in the direction of those channels. Uh,
Thank you, man.
yeah,
Thank you.
man. Thank you again, dude. It was a great conversation.
Yep, no problem.